The trolley car scenario presented at the beginning of the lecture serves as a classic gateway into the complexities of moral philosophy. By forcing an immediate choice between two tragic outcomes, the speaker compels the audience to confront their own latent ethical frameworks. At its core, the situation asks whether we are bound by a rigid set of rules, or whether our morality should be defined strictly by the outcomes we produce. When a large majority of individuals opt to divert the trolley to save 5 lives at the cost of 1, they are intuitively aligning themselves with a logic that prioritizes the net preservation of human life. This instinctive reaction highlights a common tendency to measure the rightness of an action by its measurable consequences, a perspective that simplifies complex human suffering into a manageable mathematical problem of life versus death. However, the ease with which people accept this consequentialist logic in the first scenario is quickly challenged when the mechanics of the situation change. The transition from the role of a driver making a split-second decision to an onlooker contemplating the physical act of pushing a person off a bridge shifts the moral landscape entirely. This shift suggests that while we may desire the best overall outcome, our moral compass is heavily influenced by the degree of our agency and the visceral nature of our involvement. The introduction of the fat man scenario acts as a litmus test for the consistency of our ethics, revealing that most people possess deep-seated boundaries regarding what they consider permissible, regardless of how many lives might be saved by crossing those lines. This friction between the initial choice and the secondary, more intimate scenario reveals a fundamental tension in human ethics. If saving 5 lives is the ultimate goal, the method of achieving that goal should logically be irrelevant to those committed to maximizing utility. Yet the overwhelming refusal to physically push a person to their death indicates that our moral intuition is not purely consequentialist. We feel a profound difference between allowing an event to unfold and actively causing the death of an innocent bystander, even if the result, 1 death versus 5, is numerically identical. This distinction suggests that human morality is not just about the final tally of survivors, it is deeply entangled with the perceived integrity of our actions and the rights of the individuals involved. The speaker's use of these examples is calculated to strip away the comfort of unexamined beliefs. By forcing students to defend their inconsistent reactions, the lecture environment transforms abstract philosophical concepts into immediate personal questions. When a student attempts to explain why the two cases differ, they are often forced to rely on distinctions that crumble under scrutiny. The struggle to reconcile the switch scenario with the bridge scenario is not a failure of logic. Rather, it is a demonstration of how our moral brains operate on multiple, often conflicting levels. We are torn between a desire for efficient, positive results and an equally powerful aversion to committing acts that violate our core understanding of what it means to be a moral agent in the world. As the discussion progresses into the medical scenarios, the stakes become even more crystallized. The shift from a trolley to an emergency room setting where a doctor must prioritize patients removes the mechanical element but retains the core question of resource allocation. Most people readily accept that a doctor should save the 5 moderately injured patients over the 1 severely injured patient. This consensus suggests that when we are in roles defined by duty and professional obligation, our consequentialist impulses are much easier to justify. It seems we are more comfortable with allowing someone to die as an unintended consequence of saving others than we are with actively engineering a death to save others, even when the net result is the same. The final and perhaps most disturbing scenario, the transplant surgeon, serves to break the consequentialist argument entirely for most participants. By suggesting that a doctor could harvest the organs of a healthy person to save 5 others, the instructor creates a scenario that almost everyone rejects as monstrous. This rejection is crucial because it highlights the point at which the pursuit of the greater good encounters an absolute moral boundary. The fact that almost no one would sacrifice an innocent, healthy bystander, even to save 5 lives, proves that for most people there are certain rights, like the right to life, that cannot be bargained away for any amount of utility. This realization marks the transition from purely outcome-based thinking to the recognition of categorical duties. These dilemmas are not merely intellectual exercises, they are reflections of how we navigate the world. We constantly make decisions that involve trade-offs, yet we prefer to operate under the assumption that our actions are guided by solid, unwavering principles. The lecture forces us to admit that our principles are often fragile and situational. When we claim that it is better that 5 should live, we feel confident in that assertion until a scenario is introduced that forces us to become the direct instrument of someone else's death. This process of estrangement, where the familiar rules of our moral life become suddenly strange and questionable, is the engine that drives philosophical inquiry. The instructor's assertion that we are unsettled by what we already know is a profound insight into the human condition. We all have a sense of right and wrong, but we rarely subject that sense to the rigor of formal analysis. By dragging these intuitions into the light of the classroom, the speaker demonstrates that our internal moral coherence is often an illusion. We are guided by a mix of empathy, social conditioning, and logic, and when these elements collide, we are forced to reevaluate our position. This is not a comfortable process, as it requires us to confront the possibility that our moral foundations might be more fluid than we would like to admit. Moreover, the role of skepticism in this process is addressed with nuance. It is easy to conclude that because there is no perfect, universally agreed-upon answer to the trolley problem, all moral positions are equally valid. The instructor correctly identifies this as an evasion. To treat moral dilemmas as matters of subjective opinion is to abandon the responsibility of living a thoughtful life. Even if we cannot reach a singular, definitive answer, the act of striving for a consistent moral framework is essential. We are forced to engage with these questions because, in our daily lives, whether in politics, medicine, or personal relationships, we are constantly making choices that imply a specific moral stance. The lecture serves as a reminder that philosophy is not a pretty toy to be handled only by academics. It is a necessary tool for anyone who wishes to understand the gravity of their own decisions. The risks mentioned, that philosophy might make us worse citizens before it makes us better, are real. By questioning our assumptions, we become less sure of our positions, which can lead to a sense of instability. However, this instability is necessary for growth. If we never question why we believe what we believe, we are not living as free, thinking individuals. We are simply acting out the scripts provided to us by our culture and upbringing. The transition from the initial trolley scenario to the more complex medical cases shows that our morality is not a monolithic structure. It is a composite of various frameworks, some of which are at odds with one another. We possess a utilitarian streak that wants to optimize for the best results, but we also possess a Kantian sensibility that respects the inherent dignity of the individual. These two forces are in constant tension. Acknowledging this tension is the first step toward a more mature understanding of ethics. It allows us to see that moral dilemmas are not puzzles to be solved, but ongoing conversations about what we value and who we want to be. The student feedback throughout the lecture illustrates how difficult this process can be. When Andrew, for instance, tries to maintain his moral distinction between steering a trolley and pushing a man, he is effectively trying to preserve his own moral innocence. The instructor's pushback, asking what if he could use a trapdoor instead, is not just an attempt to win an argument. It is an attempt to expose the limits of Andrew's reasoning. By slowly dismantling the crutches that allow us to feel safe in our moral choices, the instructor forces the students to get closer to the core of their beliefs. The mention of Jeremy Bentham and Immanuel Kant provides the necessary historical context for these modes of thought. By labeling our instincts as consequentialist or categorical, the speaker provides us with a vocabulary to understand our internal conflicts. This is not about choosing one philosopher over the other. It is about recognizing that these two traditions represent two fundamental ways of engaging with the world. We need the utilitarian's focus on consequences to address issues of public policy and resource allocation, but we need the Kantian's focus on rights and duties to ensure that we do not lose our humanity in the process. The restlessness of reason mentioned in the closing remarks is a fitting description for the state of mind a student should aim for after such a session. If one walks out of the lecture feeling completely satisfied with their previous unexamined opinions, the course has failed. The goal is to feel a lingering sense of doubt, a realization that the questions are far more complex than they first appeared. This restlessness is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of engagement. It means that the individual is no longer content to accept simple answers to profound questions. Finally, the inclusion of the survivor story at the end of the transcript adds a layer of raw human desperation to the discussion. While the trolley scenarios are hypotheticals, the reality of survival in extreme circumstances forces the audience to consider whether morality is a luxury of the well-fed. When people are pushed to the brink, their moral frameworks often shift. This serves as a final challenge to the students. Does our morality hold up under pressure? Can we maintain our categorical duties when our own survival is at stake, or is our commitment to principles only as strong as our comfort? Ultimately, the first part of this journey is about recognizing that moral philosophy is inescapable. Whether we choose to acknowledge it or not, every action we take reflects a set of beliefs about what matters most. By studying these cases, we are not learning a new set of facts but gaining a new way of seeing ourselves. We are moving from a state of innocence, where our beliefs are simply given to us, to a state of awareness, where we must take ownership of the principles that guide our lives. This transition is difficult, but it is the prerequisite for any truly ethical life. The structure of the lecture, moving from the mechanical to the interpersonal, is a masterclass in philosophical pedagogy. It prevents the audience from settling into a comfortable rhythm. Just when a student thinks they have found a consistent rule, the instructor presents a new scenario that makes that rule seem untenable. This constant state of flux is exactly what is needed to break down dogmatic thinking. It is a process of clearing the ground, removing the weeds of unexamined prejudice, and preparing the soil for a more thoughtful, reasoned approach to morality. The pedagogical method used here is profoundly utilitarian in its own right. By causing a degree of unsettling or discomfort to the students, the lecture is aiming for the greater good of fostering a more reflective, critically minded society. The transient discomfort of a student realizing their argument is inconsistent is a small price to pay for the long-term benefit of developing a more robust, honest moral outlook. This is how intellectual progress is achieved, not through the passive consumption of facts, but through the active, sometimes painful process of wrestling with ideas that challenge our very identity. In conclusion, the opening of this course serves as a microcosm of the entire philosophical enterprise. It starts with the familiar, leads us into the strange, and leaves us with the unsettling realization that we are the ones who must decide where the story leads. The trolley car is more than a vehicle for a thought experiment. It is a symbol for the runaway nature of life itself. We are all in various ways on a track, and we are all forced to make choices that affect the lives of others. The question is not whether we will make those choices, but whether we will make them with the awareness and the rigor that such responsibility requires. Part 2: The Evasion of Skepticism. The temptation to retreat into skepticism when faced with the complexity of these moral dilemmas is almost universal. After witnessing the arguments in the classroom, it is easy to adopt the stance that because no single person or philosopher has solved the problem of the trolley car, there must be no truth to be found. This view, which the instructor labels as an evasion, provides a convenient exit strategy. It allows one to stop the difficult work of thinking, and instead rest in the comfortable assertion that morality is simply a matter of personal opinion. However, this response ignores the reality that even in our daily lives we cannot afford to be skeptics. Every political decision, every medical procedure, and every social norm is a choice that affects others, and these choices must be rooted in some form of reasoning. The problem with the skeptical approach is that it fails to acknowledge the persistent nature of these questions. If these dilemmas were truly unimportant, they would have vanished from human discourse long ago. The fact that they have been debated for centuries, from Aristotle to Mill, suggests that they touch upon something fundamental to our existence. Skepticism acts as a resting place for reason, as Kant noted, but it is not a place where we can live. To live is to act, and to act is to endorse a particular set of values. By declaring that there are no right answers, the skeptic is, in effect, abdicating their role in the ongoing project of building a more just society. Furthermore, the skepticism often used to avoid these debates is rarely consistent. Those who claim that everyone has their own truth often become deeply passionate when a specific, real-world injustice occurs. They will argue for human rights, equality, or fairness with great conviction. This inconsistency reveals that we are not truly skeptics at heart. We are just hesitant to commit to a rigorous, defensible moral framework because doing so might require us to change our own behavior or challenge our existing comforts. Skepticism is often a mask for a desire to avoid the personal inconvenience that comes with real moral growth. The lecturer's rejection of this evasion is a call to action. By insisting that we cannot simply throw up our hands, the instructor is demanding a higher level of intellectual honesty. We must grapple with the fact that these questions are unavoidable because we live our answers every day. If we decide not to turn the trolley, we are making a choice. If we decide to turn it, we are making a choice. Silence and passivity are not neutral positions, they are active endorsements of the status quo. The goal of this philosophical inquiry is to bring these hidden choices into the light so that they can be examined, debated, and perhaps refined. This process of awakening the restlessness of reason is a powerful antidote to the complacency that characterizes much of modern discourse. We live in an age that often prioritizes speed, convenience, and emotional reaction over deep reflection. The classroom environment, by contrast, demands that we slow down and look at the foundation of our judgments. It is an exercise in intellectual patience. By insisting that we articulate our reasons, the instructor is teaching the audience that their opinions are only as good as the logic and the principles that support them. This is an essential skill for anyone who wishes to participate in public life. The political risks of this philosophy are also worth considering. If philosophy turns us into skeptics or, worse, makes us worse citizens by distancing us from the practical, everyday concerns of society, we must ask if it is worth the effort. The answer from a perspective focused on long-term outcomes is a resounding yes. A citizen who has been debilitated by philosophy, meaning one who has lost their blind faith in convention and authority, is actually more valuable than one who follows blindly. The confusion and instability that result from questioning one's beliefs are not signs of failure, they are the signs of a mind that is beginning to think for itself. When we consider the historical examples provided, such as the sacrifice of the passengers on 9/11, we see how these abstract dilemmas permeate our real-world hero narratives. We honor those who made a choice to prevent a greater tragedy, even though that choice involved taking innocent lives. This societal consensus, that the sacrifice of the few to save the many was an act of heroism, is a deeply utilitarian judgment. Yet we rarely acknowledge the ethical weight of that judgment in our daily lives. Bringing this into the classroom forces us to see that we already live by these principles, even if we are uncomfortable admitting it. The comparison to the transplant surgeon case is particularly effective at highlighting why we need these philosophical distinctions. If we are pure utilitarians, we might be tempted to say that the surgeon is acting rightly, but our moral intuition screams that this is wrong. Why? Because we value the sanctity of the individual in a way that utilitarianism often struggles to account for. We need the categorical framework to protect us from the cold, mechanical logic of purely optimizing for the greater good. This balancing act between the collective and the individual is the central drama of political life. The challenge, therefore, is to create a society that is both efficient and humane. We want to maximize the well-being of the population, a worthy utilitarian goal, but we must also ensure that we do not sacrifice the rights of the innocent to do so, a vital Kantian protection. Skepticism offers no guidance in this balancing act, it only offers an excuse to avoid it. By refusing to accept skepticism as a dwelling place, we commit ourselves to the hard work of building a framework that can accommodate both the needs of the many and the rights of the few. The pedagogical strategy of using playfulness and sobriety is essential here. By injecting humor, such as the fat man on the bridge or the surgeon with a healthy patient in the next room, the instructor lowers the defensive barriers of the students. It is easier to talk about the morality of killing when the scenarios are absurdly extreme. This absurdity serves to isolate the moral principle from the emotional weight of a real-life situation. Once the principle is isolated, it can be examined, and once it is understood, it can be applied to more serious, real-world problems. This is the estrangement that the lecture speaks of. We need to see our own moral assumptions as if they were objects in a museum to be poked and prodded rather than as part of our own skin. This distance is what allows for objective assessment. It is the beginning of wisdom. When we stop identifying our opinions with our very identity, we become capable of changing our minds when the facts or the logic demand it. That is a rare and valuable trait, one that is crucial for the health of any community. The mention of Callicles and Socrates is a bridge to the past that reinforces the timelessness of these struggles. Callicles, advice to get real and focus on livelihood and reputation, is just as relevant today as it was in ancient Greece. We are constantly pressured to abandon the petty quibbles of philosophy in favor of more practical pursuits. But the question remains, what is the point of a successful, productive life if it is not informed by a clear understanding of what makes life worth living? Philosophy is the ultimate practical pursuit, even if it does not yield an immediate paycheck. Skepticism also fails because it ignores the human need for meaning. We are creatures who seek reasons and justifications for our existence and our actions. A philosophy that says nothing is certain and everything is relative leaves us adrift, without a compass to navigate the moral world. By contrast, a philosophy that embraces the restlessness of reason acknowledges our human condition. We are not gods who can see the ultimate truth of the universe, but we are not animals either. We are beings capable of reasoning, and that capability carries with it a responsibility. The danger of becoming a worse citizen is, ironically, the greatest strength of philosophy. A good citizen in the traditional sense is one who conforms, pays taxes, and follows the rules. A philosophical citizen is one who asks why the rules exist and whether they are just. This can certainly be annoying to the powers that be, and it can be isolating for the individual. But a society that is not composed of such individuals is a society that is ripe for stagnation, corruption, and the eventual loss of the very freedom it claims to cherish. The instructor's promise that this course might make the students worse citizens before it makes them better is a testament to the honesty of the academic process. It is a warning that there is no shortcut to wisdom. One must pass through the fire of doubt before reaching a higher level of understanding. This is a difficult path, but it is one that offers the reward of genuine intellectual freedom. The students who remain, who don't drop the course to go to business school, are the ones who are willing to take the risk. Ultimately, the argument against skepticism is an argument for human agency. We are not just products of our environment, we are architects of our values. The fact that we have been debating these questions for so long is not evidence that the questions are unsolvable, but evidence that they are important. Every generation must answer them anew in the context of their own lives. We are the inheritors of a vast intellectual tradition, but we are also the authors of our own moral story. The structure of the classroom, the mix of lecture and debate, is the perfect environment for this ongoing authorship. It shows that philosophy is not a spectator sport. It requires the active, messy, and sometimes painful participation of every person in the room. By encouraging the students to speak up, to challenge each other, and to be challenged by the instructor, the course demonstrates that the truth is something we build together. It is a collective effort to clarify our values and to see where the light of reason might lead us. This brings us back to the core idea of the course, self-knowledge. The lost innocence of discovering that our moral lives are more complicated than we thought is the beginning of true adulthood. We can no longer hide behind the excuses of everyone does it or it's just common sense. We are now forced to own our choices. This is the burden of the modern, thinking individual. It is not an easy burden, but it is the price of living an authentic life in a world that is anything but simple. As the first part of the exploration concludes, it is clear that the journey is just beginning. The trolley problem is just the first step. The weeks to come, with their focus on specific philosophers and specific political issues, will only deepen the complexity, but the foundation has been laid. We have been introduced to the core tension, consequentialist utility versus categorical duty, and we have been warned of the risks, personal and political. We are now ready to begin the work of exploring these issues in earnest. The path forward, as outlined in the lecture, involves a systematic investigation into the two primary modes of moral reasoning, the consequentialist and the categorical. This structure provides a clear, manageable framework for analyzing the myriad of issues we face in the public and private spheres. By reading the great thinkers, Kant, Mill, Locke, and Aristotle, in conjunction with contemporary controversies like free speech, affirmative action, and same-sex marriage, the course promises a holistic approach to ethical education. It aims to bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and the urgent, immediate concerns of 2026. This integration is vital because it shows that philosophy is not a historical artifact. It is a living set of tools for navigating our own time. The distinction between consequentialist and categorical reasoning is the lens through which we can better understand our own internal conflicts. When we support a policy, are we doing so because it will lead to better outcomes for the most people, or because we believe it is the right thing to do regardless of the cost? These two motivations are often at war with one another. A utilitarian approach is essential for government, where resources are limited and policies must benefit the collective. Yet this approach must be tempered by a categorical respect for individual rights, without which the collective good could easily descend into tyranny. Consider the debate over affirmative action. Consequentialist might argue for it because it leads to a more diverse and eventually more equitable society, which in turn reduces social conflict and increases overall happiness. A categorical thinker, on the other hand, might oppose it on the grounds that it violates the principle of individual merit or equal treatment before the law, arguing that such policies are inherently unjust regardless of their social benefits. By seeing this debate through the lens of moral philosophy, we can move past the partisan shouting matches and engage with the actual underlying values that each side is promoting. This is the transformative power of the course. It doesn't tell the student what to think about a given policy, it teaches them how to frame the question. It shifts the conversation from what is my side's position to what is the underlying moral principle, and is that principle consistent with the way I approach other similar issues. This metacognitive approach is what ultimately builds a more responsible, informed, and effective citizen. It allows the individual to participate in public life with a degree of clarity that is rarely seen in mainstream discourse. The instructor's commitment to using contemporary political and legal controversies is a masterstroke of engagement. By showing how these issues directly affect the lives of the students, the course ensures that the restlessness of reason is directed toward practical ends. We are not just talking about hypothetical fat men on bridges. We are talking about laws, rights, and the future of our society. This connection is what makes the study of philosophy feel vital and urgent. It reinforces the idea that we are not just observers of the political process, we are participants in it. The risks identified, that philosophy might make us worse citizens or cause us to lose our innocence, are the price we pay for the privilege of self-knowledge. This is not a deterrent but a challenge. A worse citizen in the context of philosophy is merely one who is no longer easily manipulated by slogans and emotional appeals. This is a temporary state of confusion that leads to a more robust, independent way of thinking. It is the necessary, painful process of outgrowing the simple, black-and-white worldviews we are often taught as children. The pedagogical method of the course, the mix of playfulness and sobriety, is also a reflection of the nature of the world itself. The world is full of tragic, sobering realities, yet we must live in it with a sense of perspective and even humor if we are to survive. The ability to laugh at the absurdity of the fat man scenario while also recognizing the gravity of the moral dilemma is a hallmark of emotional maturity. It shows that we can hold multiple, conflicting realities in our minds at once. The emphasis on reading the original text is also crucial. It is one thing to hear a summary of Kant or Mill, it is quite another to read their words and engage with their arguments in their own voice. This is the difference between learning about philosophy and doing philosophy. It allows the student to see that these great thinkers were not just delivering pronouncements from on high, they were grappling with the same questions that we are today. They were humans trying to make sense of the world, and in their struggles we can find inspiration and guidance for our own. The role of the educator in this process is to be a facilitator, not an oracle. By constantly asking questions, challenging the students and keeping the focus on the search for truth rather than the declaration of it, the instructor demonstrates the very virtues that the course seeks to impart. This is a collaborative effort. The success of the course depends on the engagement of the students. It is a shared journey into the depths of human reason, and the final destination is not a set of answers, but a more profound understanding of the journey itself. The restlessness of reason is a fitting conclusion to this initial stage of the journey. It suggests that we are at the beginning of a long and difficult, yet incredibly rewarding process. The doubts and the questions that have been raised are not meant to be silenced, they are meant to be nurtured. They are the seeds of critical thought. By keeping our reason restless, we ensure that we never become complacent or satisfied with the status quo. We keep the possibility of progress alive. In a world that is increasingly polarized and quick to anger, this kind of intellectual engagement is more important than ever. The ability to pause, to think, to acknowledge the weight of our choices, and to engage in respectful, rigorous debate is the foundation of any healthy democracy. This course is an invitation to join that effort. It is a call to take the risk of thinking for ourselves, to confront the complexity of the world with honesty and courage, and to live in a way that is consistent with our values. The promise of this course is not that we will become better people in a simple, easy way. It is that we will become more aware of our own beliefs, more aware of the complexity of the world, and more aware of the impact of our choices. This awareness is the true goal of moral philosophy. It is the key to living an authentic, meaningful, and responsible life, regardless of what the future holds, and that, in the most utilitarian sense of the word, is the greatest good we can possibly achieve. As the introduction draws to a close, it is evident that the students have been challenged not just on their logic but on their character. The questions they have faced are the ones that define the moral life. They have been invited to strip away the pretense and confront the core of their being. This is a rare and profound opportunity. The journey ahead will be difficult, but it is one that will leave no student the same. The lost innocence is a permanent state, and from here there is only the path forward into the deep, challenging, and endlessly fascinating world of moral inquiry. This analysis has sought to capture the depth of the dialogue and the importance of the pedagogical methods employed. By structuring the response into these three parts, we have moved from the initial trolley dilemmas to the challenge of skepticism and finally to the broader architecture of moral reasoning. This progression mirrors the experience of the student in the course, starting with the particular, moving to the foundational, and ending with the systemic. It is a model for how we can all engage with the world in a more meaningful way. Every paragraph here serves as a testament to the fact that we are not merely passive consumers of moral rules but active creators of a moral life. The restlessness of reason is a gift. It is the source of our human dignity. By choosing to embrace it, we choose to take the reins of our own existence. We choose to be thinkers in the deepest and most profound sense of the word. And that choice, made again and again in the face of life's endless trolley tracks, is what makes us human. The final takeaway is that the story of this course is indeed about the students. It is about the reader, the listener, and anyone who chooses to engage with these ideas. The trolley car is moving, the tracks are set, and the choices must be made. There is no escaping the reality of our own agency. The only question that remains is whether we will meet that challenge with the wisdom and the reflection that it so clearly demands. This is the promise, the risk, and the glory of the philosophical life. As we look toward the future, let us carry with us the lesson that moral reasoning is not a spectator sport. It is a vital living practice that we must engage in every day. Let us be grateful for the restlessness that keeps us searching, for it is that searching that allows us to grow, to improve, and to make the world a slightly better place than we found it. And let us move forward with the confidence that even if we cannot solve every problem, we can certainly improve the quality of our search for the truth. This exploration has been an attempt to mirror the instructor's approach, to take the familiar concepts of our daily lives and to make them strange enough to be truly understood. We have looked at the trolley car, the transplant surgeon, and the skeptical evasion, and we have found them all to be part of a larger, more complex whole. This is the beauty of philosophy. It takes the fragmented pieces of our experience and begins to weave them into a coherent, meaningful picture of the human condition. We end where we began, at the threshold of a great, difficult, and essential journey. The stage is set, the arguments are ready, and the students are standing at the edge of the bridge. The question is no longer what would you do, but why would you do it and what does that say about you? This is the challenge that lies before us, and it is a challenge that we must all in our own way accept. The story is indeed about us, and the time to start writing it is now.